evening, everyone from Hailing, and a good afternoon to Brian over in, whereabouts are you, Brian?
Evansville, Indiana.
Evansville, Indiana. So this is Mr. Brian Mullins from the Cold Stairs. How are you doing, Brian?
Hey, fantastic. Thanks for having me today.
No worries. Appreciate your time. So what's the weather like over in Evansville at the moment?
It's a beautiful day. It's sunny. It's about 70 degrees, light breeze, not too humid. It's a pretty day.
Pretty day, yeah. It's been really nice down here in Hailing. I mean, it's been sort of last week was a bit sort of wet and drizzly, but it has, yeah, it's warmed up, and it's always nice when the sun's out. It kind of, all the all the serotonin sort of brings out all the all the positive energy and stuff. So so
It's magic, that's for sure.
So you're in your studio. So what's your kind of setup there? You've got sort of, I can see a couple of kits.
I just got like a one room catch-all room, where I do recording and mixing and my practicing and give a few lessons here, but mainly I teach out of a store. But I always have like at least one kit set up. But this kit behind me, that's my normal Cold Stairs rig. A 13, 16, 24, 4-piece kit,
The Gretsch or Ludwig?
That's a Gretsch USA custom kit. Yeah, let me get out of the way. So
No. Yeah, no, I've seen it on a lot of the pictures. I mean, they're great kits. I mean, I'll talk about my drums later, but I've been playing an all copper kit for a long time, and I can't remember, apart from like tour kits or whatever. I've not played a wooden kit for a long time. My snares are brushed brass one. I'll show you that later. But for you, like you say, you give lessons. Obviously, you've got a studio. It's quite funny. I find a lot of drummers in the States, they've all got home studio setups, and it's the one thing I'm trying to sort of work towards. But do a lot of mixing and producing. I mean, tell me more about kind of what you do. I guess outside of the drumming, you say do a bit of mixing and stuff here and there.
Yeah, and mainly just for my own, just for the band, like we rehearse here, so we record every practice, but I'm not mixing that, trying to finish an album or anything like that now. But I will. We've done a few Cold Stairs tracks. I've had drums that we've done them here, and they came out on albums. So we do some of that here, but a lot of times, as just it's nice to have a big commercial space, especially for the drums, where you have like a high ceiling, and so in a small space like this, there's definitely limitations, but I'm blessed to have this space, and it doesn't bother anyone. Neighbors are cool, and it's a lot of fun. I've been recording at home really since ADATs were around, since the 90s, So as soon as like I had a 4-track as a kid, and that was it. I was always into sounds and like that part of it, for sure.
So I mean, the one thing I would obviously, for people who don't know you guys, the band, but obviously, about you, obviously, what I want to sort of explore first is, it's kind of what I say. It's a question I ask all the sort of musicians and drummers. Is kind of for you. What was it that started it for you in terms of, were drums your first instrument, or what inspired you to pick the sticks up?
It really happenstance. I wanted to play guitar, but this kid at my school, he was talking about this drum set he had for sale for $15, and my thinking was, well, I got $15. I can buy this drum set, and then I'll trade that for a guitar. That's kind of where my head was at, So I got that, but at the same time, the neighbor next to us, the dad played and the son also played, and they had this big gold sparkle double bass kit, and it was just always really exciting. Like the drums just have so much power to them, and you don't need an amp, you don't need anything. You can just sit down and start swinging, and so that's kind of what I did. I just kind of thought, well, I'll stick with the drums. I'll give this a try.
And like, what's kind of, I guess, they kept you going, but were you, when you were younger, were you kind of did you take lots of lessons, or did you, would you say you're theory based, or you've kind of just picked it up by ear and, developed your own style, which, I mean, obviously seeing you when we supported you in Southampton, I think you've definitely got your own unique take on sort of like, the kind of Bonham-esque,
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. As far as the formative years, I think it's a little bit of both. Like I think it's 50% that banging around in a garage, with three other knuckleheads, and just and not knowing what you're doing, not knowing how a PA works or what it's supposed to sound like or any of that stuff. Um, just coming up that way. And then also, I also had some teachers, and so I was kind of getting the other end of it. Like the proper, hey, this is what a 16th note is, this is what four measures is, and all that stuff's really helpful too, both sides of that. I'm grateful for both of those,
What I mean, what was your, I guess, your youngest memory of, I don't know, like either being in a band or you kind of like your most memorable sort of first moment behind the drums? What was your,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I didn't start like super early or anything like that. I had a pretty late start and I actually tried to get in school band, but I was so bad and it was kind of too late. It didn't work out very well, So I started kind of late, um but I was taking lessons privately and I was always trying to put a band together. I was always wanting to find someone that wanted to make records. That was my goal from day one. I mean, that's how it works. You got to have an album, right? We want to make records. So that's what I was kind of singularly focused on, honestly, the whole time.
I mean,
Still am.
I guess like, I don't know how far we're going back, but like, obviously the days of, I mean, even predate, Napster and things like that, like how easy it has become, not just as a consumer, but as a musician, how easy and convenient it's become to record music. But obviously things like Spotify and yeah, Napster, Tidal, all those sorts of things. I mean, you go, back to the 50s, 60s, 70s. Like I said, when you only had like four tracks. I mean, I'm reading a book about Tony Visconti. It's called Tony Visconti and the Brooklyn Boy, and he obviously talks about his time working with like David Bowie, Mark Bolan, Joe Cocker, and just how obviously like the role of an engineer and stuff and a producer, how they've evolved, but just kind of the importance of, I guess, live shows, but also your kind of your image and your brand. But um I guess you go back to like cassette tape and vinyl. I guess music was probably easily accessible going into like a club to watch a band, whereas now it's literally you can pull off a song and not even pay for it, or pay 99. It's a completely different, what's the word, the industry is very different, and it's still kind of changing. I mean, vinyl keeps having its ebbs and flows and kind of how popular it is, but I mean, how different was it for, I guess, what was the importance of recording music then to sort of what it is now, and I guess, like I said, what's available to us now as musicians,
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it's different. I mean, music is free now. That's just the reality. You can consume so much music and not pay a cent. The equation does feel out of balance. Um, However, artists historically, have not come out on the good end of the bargain with large labels and um, so I think to a large degree that stuff is just kind of um, in the way and noise to uh, making the album. You got to have the product. You got to have a goal. You have to make the record regardless. You have to make the record regardless. So um, how people are going to consume it, that's bigger than any one band, or that's a generational thing, and
Mm.
the cat's out of the bag, so to speak. It's not going back. You know what I mean? So just got to keep making records.
Well, I guess like, I mean, record deals and stuff, because I think obviously like the Beatles had Apple Records, obviously the Rolling Stones had their own label, and back in sort of like, the 60s and 70s, I guess, it's quite a big deal to, I guess, have your own label. It was quite cool, but I guess, sort of, like I said, depends on your goal, but having, going out and getting a record deal, how important is that? Does that still have the same importance now than it did then? Because I mean, a lot of bands, so like, my guys, we're all very much a sort of do it yourself in terms of everything's in house, more or less. You keep control of everything. You got your PRS and you kind of royalties, whatever. But everything's sort of pretty much done by us. We've used external PR in the past. We've got a friend of ours and our banjo player Pete, they've got like a PR company called Top Floor, and they sort of do artist services. So that helps. But yeah, how important would you say a record deal is?
I
Say
don't think it.
twen- you know.
Yeah, I don't think it's as important as what it once was. I mean, you can make a fine record on your own, and reach. A record company that's worth being signed to, they're going to want you to have those things already. A social media presence, live shows out there, doing the thing, creating a buzz, having a good product. You got to do that anyway, regardless. So, yeah, I don't think it's a necessity to make a record and to make some noise, and to get some shows and to get a little bit of traction.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you guys are with. I think you're with Mascot, but I think how many albums have you been with Mascot? Just for the Southern, or
This is the third
the third with
the third
Mascot?
album on Mascot. Yeah. Yeah, we had Heavy Shoes, Voices, and then the Southern just came out September the 6th.
That's right. On my 40th birthday, so a great album coming out on my 40th
Oh, thank you.
was quite cool. I've got it on vinyl. I mean, obviously, I listened on Spotify, but I've got the vinyl. I've got a record player, but I haven't got my hi-fi stuff set up because I haven't got a spare room to. And my next door neighbours have had a baby recently, so I don't want to play too much. But yeah, I mean, it's such.
Right, yeah, yeah.
I set up the show. Actually, yeah. So I bought obviously the Southern, so I'm looking forward to getting that on the record player. And
Oh, thank you.
Voices, another great record. I mean, it's so. I mean, how many records has Bryce done with you? Because obviously you used to be a duo before. So I think he's been with you what, 3 albums, Bryce?
Two albums. He's on Voices and he's also on the Southern.
That's right. Yeah, and then before that on the previous record, you were a duo. I mean, that's something I want to talk about a bit later. The band evolution. But just going back to yourself, what were you? The drummers and the music. What were you primarily influenced by as a youngster, even before you even thought about drums? What kind of bands, artists, what kind of got them interested in, I guess, in music?
Yeah, I would have to say it's probably MTV. Like MTV was king when I was a kid. It was from everything from like, the metal stuff to Michael Jackson to Duran Duran to Sting, Prince. The Police. Just a lot of cool stuff. And that was kind of my first exposure really to music. I grew up in a small town. My parents weren't necessarily musical folks, so um, that's how I was kind of got turned on to music and became interested in it.
So what drummers, I guess, sort of really started your journey into.
Okay, yeah, I definitely like Stuart Copeland was one of the first ones that I really liked. My neighbor, his son used to play Every Breath You Take. He would turn on the stereo and throw on the headphones and play the drums to that, and it's pretty straightforward. So you could understand it. Oh, okay, I see how this kind of works. And I always just thought it was cool. So Alex Van Halen. I mean, the first album I bought with my own money was 1984. My
Amazing.
mom didn't want to let us get it because it had the cigarette, the baby smoking on the front, and she was like, yeah, not having it. But we talked her into it. So, and those guys, I still love those guys today. They have such a identifiable sound. Both those guys, Stuart Copeland as soon as you hear them. Alex Van Halen as soon as you hear them. I like guys like that that have they have a voice. You know who it is as soon as you hear them. You know.
Would you say your musical tastes, because obviously you discover new bands and new drummers, and you kind of I guess everyone kind of steals a few riffs and a few fills and styles here and there. But like, has your music tastes changed? Have you, I guess, as you've got older, has your tastes mellowed a bit more, or have you got more into like heavy stuff? Because like you said, MTV, grunge, Soundgarden, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, kind of, um, yeah. Has your taste changed, or what do you like?
I don't really think so. Not to hopefully the palette's gotten bigger. Like, I really like Pink Floyd. As a young man, I didn't like Pink Floyd. I didn't get it. I wasn't, you know, I needed a soundtrack for uh tearing something up, and Pink Floyd wasn't that. So and then like later in life, I really got into Steely Dan the past 20 years. Just been a Steely Dan freak. Just love it. So yeah, I think, but really, I still like the same stuff. I still love the Police. I still love Van Halen. I love stuff with, like, some pop sensibilities, and something with a that has some electric guitar, something that rocks. Something made by humans.
Yeah. I mean, give me an example. So, like, what's the kind of, because I like to think my tastes are eclectic. Everything from like Howlin' Wolf all the way through to kind of like Dave Lombardo. Old school. Thrash metal, Slayer. What's the kind of the most, I guess, I say conservative, wrong word, but like, what's the kind of most chilled out kind of band or artist that you listen to, and I guess what's the at the other end, what's the kind of, I guess, most extreme maybe.
Most extreme. Okay, okay. I don't know. I guess on the chill factor, I would say like maybe Pink Floyd or Steely Dan, or maybe Miles Davis or something like that. On the other end, probably not much heavier than like Mastodon or something like
No.
that. And once it gets a little heavier than that, I don't have quite that much anger in me, so I but yeah, just anything in the vein of rock and roll, I'm good with.
Because I think he's saying like the heavy stuff, like, I mean, there's obviously a lot of, like, say, out there, like black, call it like black satanic metal, whatever you want to call it. Like, I appreciate drummers who can do blast beats and really, really ridiculously quick double kicks. I mean, a lot of the modern metal, emo, screamo, hardcore, all the different subgenres, a lot of that stuff, even live, is triggered. The kick drum's triggered, the toms and the snares triggered. But yeah, I can appreciate someone who can do blast beats. I can't. I'm not that fast. I haven't got that endurance. But like, yeah, it gets to a point where I guess, say like the vocals become so what's the word? Indistinct. Like, you can't understand what's being sung, and like all you've really got to go on is, I guess, the noise, the rhythm. But I mean, like I said, Mastodon, they got, as they got, I guess, older and a bit mature, kind of pre-Leviathan, because Leviathan's a great record, but you've gone to like, was it Once More Round the Sun? So, they kind of matured a bit in their sound, and I think they became a bit more melodic. And what's the drummer? It's not Brand. Is it Brandela?
Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
He started singing, and he's got a great voice. Yeah, they started. They didn't get more poppy, but I guess a slight element of like I said, slightly more commercial than like a Leviathan or Remission. But it's like the time signatures and just the flavor of what he does on the drums. Obviously the guitars. It's very different. Prog metal, I think, is a great fusion of genres. I mean, if you listen to well, I think, say Pink Floyd, that's very, very proggy. Obviously, you can talk about Rush, yes, King Crimson, but there's a band who I recommend you listen to if you haven't. I've been listening for a long time. A band called Periphery. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So Matt Halpin, and he's I think kind of one of my favorite drummers of the I guess like the 21st century, because I mean he's very very technical, but the music's great. It's like you got the light and shade where it's kind of Spencer Sotelo, he'll kind of do a singing part, and there's lots of melody, lots of finger picking, and then it goes into like this aggressive kind of growling kind of and but it goes up and down. There's rather than just a full-on onslaught of 400 BPM, indecipherable, I think that's what I was looking for, indecipherable lyrics, and it just becomes a bit sort of too much. And I guess like Slayer's quite extreme. You look like Rain in Blood, it is very full on. And however you'd want to quantify melody, I don't know, but just kind of, I think sometimes if you're not listening to the lyrics, or if you don't really agree with the lyrics, sometimes just the music and the kind of, yes, or your internal caveman, you kind of latch on to certain elements of music, and I think that's how you kind of, like as a drummer, for me, being self-taught, you just listen by ear and like consuming music, what you like. There's certain things in music which you latch onto. You go, oh, I like that, or I don't like, and it's just kind of. And I think my tastes are always not say changing but evolving. Like I got into Zeppelin and AC/DC probably quite late on, so I'm 40. I think when I went to university I was 20. Mid-20s, so I got into Zeppelin and AC/DC really late, and I don't know why I got into them so late. I think my late mum, my late dad. So what I was brought up on was Buddy Holly. Like my dad's favorite artist was Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, Richie Valens, the Monkees, the Move, the Who, and then my mum was being from Egypt, so I'm half Arabic technically. She introduced me to a lot of like native, so almost like Bedouin desert kind of folk music, really traditional Arabic stuff, which was really, really cool and very, kind of in a way psychedelic. So like when you listen to the Beatles and Revolver, there's obviously the influence of like Indian and kind of Arabic influences, so
Sure.
a very eclectic sort of music upbringing. And like my first concert ever was 1992. It was Michael Jackson, Dangerous World Tour at Wembley Stadium in London, and that, I mean, I do remember it was an amazing, amazing concert. Like his, I always forget the name of the drummer for Michael Jackson, but so tight, amazing band. And that, I think that was one of the gigs that kind of made me think, oh, I want to be in a band. Obviously
Yeah.
you'll probably testify to, it's quite challenging being in a band, I guess. All the stuff that, going on stage, rocking out, writing good songs, that's great. But it's all, the travel, the PR, the kind of food, all the things that are kind of, I guess people don't really see the kind of, because
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
don't see that, like I think I saw a picture on the Instagram or Facebook where you were asleep in the van and and I think there was one music video we did where I was asleep in the back and they filmed me just asleep, and I was like, oh man, don't do, but that's,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the kind of not so rock and roll bit, you know.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. I'll take sleep anywhere I can get it. So,
Nice. You like me.
yeah, so I'm the designated sleeper. So, they can follow all they want. I'm cool with it. No, man, we have a good time. Yeah, but you're right though. The travel is, it's the same as like when you're on vacation with your family and you got to drive 3.5, 4 hours. Like everybody starts to get a little grumpy, and it's like, man, I got to get out of this vehicle. I just need, and it's that, day in and day out. But it's we do good together, and it's what the job is. So
Yeah, it's all the
yeah,
kind of things you need to do. Sometimes, you drive 8 hours to play for 1 hour, pack it down, and then do it all over again the next day. Drive, because obviously like in the States, to drive from one, you look on the map, it looks like different states are quite close together, but effectively it's like you're driving across another country. You're driving so far. I mean, playing in the States is something I'd love to do. I mean, Dave our guitar player, he's got he goes out to Long Beach quite often, most years, and he's buddies with a guy called Buzzy who used to be in a band called Laidlaw. I mean, they've been on tour with like ZZ Top and Van Halen, and he's got a studio out in Long Beach called Buzztone Studios. He's done like some guitar work on us. His partner Trish, she's done some vocals and some of our stuff. But yeah, he goes out there quite a lot, and I just get really jealous. Like, I think it was the Rainbow, I think, and like he ended up sitting next to Lemmy having a beer, not realizing it was Lemmy. You know, he's met a lot of his heroes. I mean, they say don't
Yeah.
don't drink with your heroes, but yeah, playing the
Yeah.
States is something I'd love to do because it's just over here, it's weird. You get like, say, the Cadillac 3 or whatever, or Blackberry Smoke. They'll come over here and they'll do really, really well. They still do well in their own, in their own country, but just kind of, like an English band doing, roots Americana stuff. In their own way, playing over in the States, it's just something a little bit different, but it's all, the travel and but yeah, I'd love to come over and do some show. We keep getting asked by a lot of our friends who live over in the States, I'll come over. It's like, it's only just jump on a plane, bring your sticks, bring a guitar, you'll be fine, man. But it's probably not as easy as that. But listen, let's talk about the band. So obviously you were a duo with Chris for quite some time, up to what, 2018 maybe.
Bryce has been in the band about 2.5 years. So I think he joined. I think he joined in January of 21, if I'm
Okay.
not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. So Chris and I have been playing together since really 2004, and as the Cold Stairs since about 2008, 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. We had a couple of false starts. Chris had a battle with cancer that put us on the sidelines for a little bit.
Oh man.
Yeah. So all that, thank God, worked out okay, and we were able to continue. So yeah, but we've been a trio for 2.5 years, and Bryce fits in great. It feels like he's been here the whole time, and it's great to have around. It's a good time.
So what kind of, I guess, at what stage, did you, at what point did you go, right, we need to get a bass player? Because I guess as a duo, um, Chris has to cover sort of some of the bass duties, and I guess as a drummer, you kind of
Sure.
need to fill in that kind of low end sound. I mean, I was talking to Paul at the Southampton gig, and because he was talking about the kind of setup that our guitar player has, and he said, he went through a similar, like an octave drop pedal. I mean, tell me about the setup and how, I guess, you covered that thick sound, well, live especially.
Yeah. Live, he had three amps, I guess. He had two guitar amps and a bass amp, and but it was all amplifying the same part. So if he would turn off, he would turn on one amp, or have, when it came to the chorus or the most exciting part of the song, they'd all three be on. It was a massive sound. It sounded really cool. But it's limiting in the fact that he can't play a guitar solo
No.
and have the bass underneath, and it's funny because I was opposed at first. I didn't really want to add a member because I didn't want it to change the writing. I always felt Chris is such a great writer. I didn't want it to turn into, guitar solo city over songwriting. You know what I mean? Because I think we've all seen that happen in bands, where you just kind of, you work on the solo section first, and the solo's twice as long as what it should be, and solo, and So, but anyway, in my opinion, quickly changed, and Chris, I mean, it really offered him a chance to grow as a player. It's remarkable that this is only the second record as a three-piece, and the guitar work he's able to pull off, and the solos he composes, and that's a lot to ask a guy to not play a solo for 10 years, when he can. It's like, don't do any fill-ins. I know you know how to do them, you've worked on them, but just don't do it. Like, what the heck, so
But
yeah.
how did you have to, your, not say your style as such, but I guess you know, the kind of, yeah, what you played as such? Did you find you had to, you know, do a lot more floor tom and kick drum work to kind of try and boost, you know, I guess add some more bass, you know, some low frequencies and tones to what Chris was kind of doing?
Yeah, yeah, probably so. There's a lot of songs that we had quarter note kick in there, and we had, start small so you have somewhere to go, as far as an arrangement part, especially when you have limited instrumentation, So less is more, and we would start sparsely. Like one of our old songs is called Jesus Brother James, and it's just like 2 and 4 on the snare, nothing else, no kick, no snare, just I almost would like, like hand claps at church or something, to fit that song. But um, but yeah, we did, and I still kind of buy into that mentality of start sparsely so you have somewhere to go, so you can introduce new ideas later on in the song.
Because he's definitely the early, you know, uh, remind me of the name of the record that G's brother James is on. What's it called?
It's called A Cold Wet Night and a
Got
Howling Wind. We
That's
just
it.
call it Cold Wet Night usually. Yeah, it's such a long title, but yeah.
Because I found that your earlier stuff had that very kind of lo-fi, kind of almost garage rock kind of. I guess a bit like, you know, we listen to the Black Keys, you know, the very early Black Keys stuff, and then obviously as you brought in Bryce, obviously, yeah, not talking about live, but when you listen to the recordings, you know, I'm guessing obviously, you know, you go different producers and different engineers, different studios, you've got different instruments, you know, the sound has, you know, become a lot more. When I say refined, just I guess to an extent a bit more polished and kind of you know, from I guess from a Black Keys kind of say duo lo-fi garage sound, which is cool, very fuzzy and very rootsy, but then yeah, almost evolved into like a Rival Sons, which, you know, I think you guys have been on tour of them, but you know, a very big Rival Sons bluesy sound, but you know, you're still not drifted away from that core sound of, you know, what's made you guys really sort of well known. But yeah, there's a lot more um different parts. I guess like the early stuff kind of, to me, rhythmically and musically, it sounds a bit more raucous and a bit more like experimental almost. You know, a lot of feedback and lots of other noises happening. Obviously, like, you know, on the studio, you can kind of do as many overdubs as you want. But yeah, I guess the songs later on have become. I don't want. I hate to use the word pop. I really hate to use the word commercial, but there's definitely more of a. Yeah, I guess like the music's more got a wider. It's more mature, if that makes sense. You know,
Maturity, yeah, maturity, yeah, sure,
and
sure, yeah.
it's kind of you know, I think sometimes when you're, say, you're young and kind of, you know, in the industry, and you're obviously always exploring new ground. When you're writing new songs, obviously your lyrics evolve, your arrangements, your ideas, your, you know, your ear and stuff. I think as you get older as a person, you know, you become more mature in yourself, and you become, you know, um I guess it's this is what I've always said, is being a drummer and being a musician are two very different things. I think as soon as you become a musician, you become more spatially aware of everything else that's going on around you. So listening to the vocals, listening to the guitar phrasing, and, you know, locking in with certain things. Whereas I think if as a drummer, it's kind of, you can play the drums, and that's kind of, well, not say that's it, but yeah, being a musician is really different. You've got to have this maturity. It's the whole knowing um when to push forward, when to pull back. Is, again, it's the whole light and shade thing, because you'll naturally notice in a live show, you know, that maybe the, you know, say Chris might want to push forward with something, and you're kind of rocking it up, and then kind of looking at Bryce, and maybe he's kind of taking it down a bit, and it's just kind of, you know, making sure, you know, you're all on the kind of, you know, the same page, because being in a band, I guess it's like soccer or whatever, you know, it's a team effort. you know, and you've all got to have like, I guess, I don't want to draw too many parallels to sport, but you've got to have like a game plan, live. You kind of do the set, why have you picked those songs and stuff, and just make sure the whole set is fluid. And I know they had a few issues with the strings and stuff like the gig, but the gig in Southampton was amazing. You guys, like, for us anyway, we're like, right, despite the string issues, like, we learned a lot of lessons. Like, it was kind of, this is how it's done, and it's so good to look up to bands like you and kind of, get inspired, not just from a whole band point of view, but I mean, watching you play, so consistent, so in the pocket, so locked in. Like I said, less is more, and it's about complementing what everyone else is doing. It's not like, it's not about just you, sort of like, look at these fills I can do, or look how fast I can play,
Yeah,
um
thank you.
but it's quite a
Yeah,
difficult thing to do. Like I said, the maturity thing is kind of, it was either Copeland. I listened to a podcast and basically said, as a drummer, what you want out of being a drummer, what the band want out of you as a drummer, is you want to be at the back, and you don't want the singer, the lead guitarist, whatever. You don't want them to be worried about you at the back, kind of like, oh, what's he going to do next? Is he kind of going to play ahead of the beat or behind the beat? You want them to be able to do what they want to do, and they basically trust you, kind of at the back, sort of with the engine as such, and be completely confident, and just, and it's a really difficult thing to do. It's how you all integrate as one unit. Because I've seen bands where it's clearly like, look how good I am, and there's no cohesion, and it kind of feels very disjointed, and but again, it's
yeah,
just,
yeah.
it's a difficult thing to master, I think, in the live scene. But yeah, so I mean, having obviously Bryce, I mean, have you found your playing styles changed having Bryce in the band?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, we still, you still just use your ears and kind of work through your parts and experiment. There's just another sounding board now. Now there's two people who ask, "Hey, man, which one of these sounds better, this beat or this beat?" So just and of course, I listen to what Bryce is playing, and we try to come up with something that makes sense for us to play together. Um, and yeah, it's but other than that, I mean, it's not like before, like when we didn't have a bass player, and I didn't think about it that much. I mean, you're just trying to make it sound like music. You're just trying to make the song good, whether you know whatever elements are there, so it wasn't like a constant hurdle or a constant, I need to do this, or I don't, it's not like because there's no bass player, I still had to be consistent with my bass drum parts. It's still I'm trying to tell a story with that, and I need to, even though there's no one that's gonna have to like match me or play the same notes that I play or whatever, still got to be consistent. So, but yeah, so it's not that different.
Cool. No, I mean, it's, I guess, we make the joke, like, because there's three of us. We used to have like a double bass player, guy called Alex. A lot of fun, a real sort of larger than life, larger than life character. But the thing we always struggled with was,
Mhm.
like, as a trio now, we can fit in one van. We can pretty much fit in the same hotel room, although someone's got to
Yeah,
volunteer to sleep on the floor. Um, Whereas before it'd be like separate rooms, or but now it's like bundle into the same hotel room. Dave will moan if there's not enough tea bags for him to have a cup of tea when we get from back from a gig. I know it sounds so, so rock and roll, but
yeah.
three of us in a van, it's just a lot easier. Keeps, guess it keeps the costs down, but yeah,
It's a
three.
reality.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
just a reality. I would love to play two floor toms, but I know there's not room. Let's see, like domestically, especially, there's not room, and we rent like a minivan. There's not room for the second floor tom. It won't fit. And it's just not that critical, so it gets left behind.
It's
So
funny. I've always wanted two floor toms, always. But I think when I bought my first car, I was like, right. The first thing I said was, "Is this going to fit my drum kit?" And I had like literally one up, one down,
Yeah.
kick drum, hardware, whatever. I was like, "Does that fit in this car?" Yeah, just about. And then obviously, as I sort of got a bit older, met my wife, had our first child. I had like a 4x4. Probably could have fit two floor toms in it, but I was like, do you know what? Like I said, the whole less is more thing. I find the one up, one down is a great setup because it's easier. You don't have to worry about hundreds of different toms, hundreds of different cymbals. I was like, I'm not in Dream Theater. I'm in a Roots
Right.
Americana
Right.
kind of band, and it's what suits the music.
For
Um,
sure.
but sometimes you get a gig where the rental kit is two floor toms, and sometimes they're like, yeah, kind of,
Yeah.
going all Phil Collins on it, and. But I mean, let's talk about your gear for a second. So again, sort of going back to, yes, you sort. I guess what was the first kit that you bought? What was the first drum kit you ever bought?
The first kit was a made in Japan. I'm trying to think of the brand. I think it was Polaris. I've never even like seen them. Like I think it was just like a stencil kit, like a brand that was probably made in one factory, and they had like like Ajax and Apollo and all those other brands. It was a kit like that. Red Sparkle, and it had this really cool slinger and snare drum, but I didn't like it at the time because it didn't look like rock and roll enough. But I should have kept it. But no front head. Just a four piece made in Japan. Made in Japan beater kit. Um, so yeah, that was my first rig. What was yours?
First, so do you know what a gap year is?
I don't think so.
A
No.
gap year, so it's like, when you finish, say, high school, let's call it high
Oh,
school.
sure.
So when you finish
Gotcha.
high
Yeah.
school, you either go to university straight away, or you take a year out basically, and you can either go traveling or whatever. So I decided to work in Virgin Records, Virgin Megastore in Heathrow Airport, so landside. And I basically, what I wanted to do is I want to save up a load of money and buy my first proper drum kit. So this is probably what, 2003. Worked for a year, and I saved up a whole bunch of money. My mum and dad put in some so I could get some cymbals or whatever. But it was a Tama maple custom. I can't remember the dimensions, but it had like a hanging floor tom. It was a 16 by 16, yeah, hanging floor, and like a hanging. I think it was a 12. No, 14 by 12, and it was like a really nice kind of natural amber sort of varnish color, and I loved like the front kick skin. I never changed it because it had Tama, or Tama, I had it in gold, and I had that for a long, long time. And then I bought, like, randomly this kind of oyster pearl finish DW 18 by 18 because I found the 16 by 16 wasn't kind of deep enough. But I think at the time, yeah, I didn't drive. It was kept at the studio at the band that I sort of played in at uni. Excuse me. And the snare I had this Premier. Again, it was a maple snare, 14 by, I think 14 by 5. I can't remember the series, but I had that for so long. And then did I change? Yeah, I had like a Black Beauty at one point. I had a Mapex Black Panther solid steel, which was really cool, but it was so heavy, like unnecessarily heavy.
Yeah.
And then obviously, my cymbals and the heads and stuff I've used over the years have changed. It was a really, really nice kit. Recorded on it a hell of a lot, but yeah, no, eventually I sold it. So I mean, so you went from your Polaris kit and sort of, I guess, what you've got now. Have you always been like a Gretsch player, or?
No, not really. That's kind of relatively new. I think I first kind of started getting interested in Gretsch. I went and filled in for another band and did a couple shows in Poland, and they had a Gretsch kit there for me. And I'd never played one before, and it was a USA custom kit, and I fell in love. The toms with the die cast hoops, that's there's something about that, man. I mean, I just instantly you just hear that focus and that power and that um, so dense, just a dense
Mm.
note, like, and I love Tony Williams, so the way his drums sound, and that's it, um, that Gretsch sound. So I had Gretsch fever after that, and I looked around a little bit. We did our first European tour with the Cold Stairs, and they had a Gretsch kit for me there, and I was like, man, I really got to do something about this. So Forks in Nashville, they posted this kit on Instagram, and I was telling you about my neighbor, and like the first set of real drums that I saw were those gold sparkle drums. So when I saw these gold sparkle, I'm like, man, this is meant to be. I'm just gonna snatch this up, and I've been really happy with them. So I really love the way this kit sounds. Got some coated ambassadors on them right now, and that's I'm just so happy with them. Every time I put a coated ambassador on, I'm just like, why did I ever experiment? Why did I even try anything else? It's just because I feel like you can do anything with it. Like, I can make it ring less. I can put gels on it and tape it up or whatever, big fat snare drum or
Yeah.
whatever you need to do. I can't make a 2-ply head with a dot ring more. It's only going to ring a certain amount, and that's it, And so I really like thin heads.
So have the shells, what is it? Do you say it's maple or what's the?
Yeah, on the USA Custom, it's maple and gum. There's a layer, or maybe 2 plies of gum wood in the middle, and that's supposedly part of their formula, for that USA Custom shell. That the edges, and then they got the silver inside, and the die cast hoops. So all those are kind of the hallmarks of that series. 6-ply maple shell, and
Do you know like
yeah.
the like I'm guessing they've got what maple re rings or reinforcement rings on the
No,
no?
no, 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 because they got those die cast hoops. They really kind of keep it round, and it is a 6-ply shell, so it's not super thin like the old 3 plies or
Yeah.
anything. Yeah, but no rings on those. Yep.
And so like you've been playing, Gretsch for quite some time then you'd say.
I had this kit. I've really only owned a Gretsch kit for the past. I guess I got it about 3 years ago. You know, just a little bit before we got Bryce in the band. I got it. Um, so yeah, I haven't had it that long. I just played one a while back, and like I was saying, and kind of had it my eyes on them. I tried a couple of them, almost bought like several, but I held off. How it is. You end up with more drum sets than you can really use.
Yeah.
So I just recently got rid of a few. I had a bunch of I had a couple of vintage Ludwig kits that I really liked, and the thing about drums and those classic kits is they're still out there. If you decide you want to go get us, you got to have a silver sparkle. Well, you can find one. They're available. So
I mean the sparkle finish on that it's similar to like for the second album we did. Yeah, I had a Radio King sort of a kick, snare, I think one tom. I'm pretty sure the finish was the same. I was like, oh, it just looked so good, sounded so good, had like the original reso heads on them, and I had like an old calf skin kick reso, and it sounded really really nice. I mean, there's loads of Slingerland kicks out there, and like old Rogers kits and things, but like technology, as much as you got, drum manufacturers, they keep to their unique way of whether they cold press or hot, just machinery, and I guess all things as well. Like, and I hate to say, boring, but like deforestation and just, the price of wood and things change where certain woods aren't available, and manufacturers have got to experiment with different, like exotic woods like babinga and things, but ultimately, yeah, there's, like I said, a sort of a formula. But I mean, so you said the hedge you use, so you've Remo, what, coated ambassadors on your batter side. What on your resonance? What do you use? Just a single ply clear?
Yeah, single ply clear ambassadors, but sometimes I'll use like coated ambassador on the reso too. I like that sound as well. Sometimes control sound, the black dots. I
Yeah.
like those on the bottom sometimes also. But it's one of those three, either the clear or the coated or the black dot.
And cymbals. I mean, what? Because again, cymbals are so. I don't know. Cymbals are so complex. I'm talking like the real, not saying old, but like the hand hammered stuff versus the kind of stuff that gets hammered by a machine. What symbols have you kind of gone from, and what have you settled on now? Because you had some. It was paste. I think you had some pasties at the gig, didn't you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm a Peisty player. I love their stuff. I've been using it since our first record that we made in 2010. Came out in 2010. Yeah, the engineer had a couple of Peisty crashes, and he let me borrow them, and I was hooked. I'm like, oh wow, that's not at all what I thought they were. I always thought that they were like super loud and maybe like more of a metal type thing. I don't know where I got that, because when you think about it, all my favorite players that I've mentioned, Stuart Copeland, Alex Van Halen, they're Peisty guys. That's their sound. So I just love their cymbals. I mean, I love the way they feel. It's the response is different. It's a little bit more pushback. That like they're harder. Like they don't
Yeah.
give as much. So I like that when it comes to hitting the crashes. I really like the way they feel. The Giant Beat series, they just sound so good. I just love them so much. I like a big old ride, like a 24, and then I really like the 19-inch Giant Beat crashes. Those are awesome, and some big hi hats. I was using 16s on the European tour. Those were the Big Beat series, 16-inch hi hats. But man, it's great because it's like having another crash cymbal.
Yeah.
Uh, and by the end of the tour, I was kind of figuring that out, and I was like, hey, I can kind of use this as like a miniature crash that I, can control with the foot. Yeah, it was fun to play them. So
16 sheet. I think, like, because I was always 14 inches, and then what I'm on now is well, actually I've been playing, to be honest, 13-inch hi-hats for quite a while. Just it's got like a tighter chick sound, it's got a higher pitch.
sure,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I've used, everything from like Zildjian, K Customs, which again love the sort of, say, jazzy but like vintage, the dark sound. Have we used Pice? I've used there's a brand called UFIP.
sure, yeah,
UFIP.
yeah,
I think I used them for a bit. Sabian. I've tried Sabians, but what my favourite cymbal has always been, I think the one brand and series that I always settled on for the longest period of time was the Meinl Byzance stuff. I like had a couple of dual finish crashes. I had like a raw, like really dark, earthy set of 13-inch raw hats, and then I had a Byzance. What was it? Jazz ride, and then I had this really nice 18-inch jazz sandblasted ride. It was quite thin, but it had this sandblasted coating, and it was really delicate. But at the same time, when you really laid into it, it gave you this really nice colourful wash. And I don't know, just I'd spend, like, there's a place in a place called Fareham in the UK called Graham Russell Drums. If you're ever, when you're next in the UK, Graham Russell Drums, honestly, is one of the best shops in the UK. And also, there was a place called Drum One, which is Manchester. But yeah, at Graham Russell Drums, I spent maybe 2 hours just tonally sort of matching the cymbals, so making sure that the hi-hat going from the hi-hat to the crash to the second crash to the ride, that tonally they had enough separation and that they sort of complemented each other. And I spent ages, and eventually I chose a set. But yeah, like now I play a brand called Diril Cymbals. So it's a guy called Ibrahim who did the Byzance series, and he did one of the Heisty series, I believe. But yeah, he kind of patented the Byzance. And then him and his brother, so Murat. Obviously, there was a brand called Murat Diril Cymbals. But yeah, so I've got sort of similar, but again, a dual zone like finished 18-inch. I think it's an ice crash. I've got like a raw crash, which again, it's just dark and unpolished on the top and then polished on the bottom. 13-inch raw hats, which again are just so trashy. And it's weird, the ride I've got is like it's kind of like a K custom. It crashes really nicely. The bell's not as big as I kind of want it to be in terms of to get that real ping. But again, they all work collectively really nicely together. But again, for me, it's all about like volume. Like that's why I don't necessarily like the A customs. They're great cymbals for certain styles of music, but for me, like they're too bright. They cut through too much, and I think you can be a heavy drummer, a light drummer. But I think if you've got, I guess, cymbals that I guess, like you said, they've got that feel. They respond to how you play, and I think that's why the cymbals I've got really work. I mean, I've just got a couple of things here. So I use these on these SimPad moderators, so they just sit under the bell, and so rather than they don't kill the sound, they just they suspend the cymbal a bit more, but they just soften the volume a bit, and also like the chromatics. But I've got those on all my cymbals. I think like I've got some on the louder cymbals. I'll use like an 80 or a 90 mil, and the ones which aren't as loud, I'll use like a smaller, maybe like a 60 mil. And I do notice a difference, and like some engineers say, "Oh, they're cool. What are they?" Rather than putting tape on your cymbals and and they really work. And it's just so I'm not a particularly hard hitter, but I think if I can reduce my sound, that's why I like Kempers and stuff. A lot of bands use, they're ditching the amps, or the amps for backstage, but the only sound you've got on stage really is maybe a guitar amp, maybe a bass amp, and everything else is your monitors. Because if you reduce your sound on stage, especially using in-ears, it does away for the need of stage monitors. The engineer's not constantly fighting for headroom on volume, but again, it's just depends if you like that old Valve sound, the old AC30 sound or Fender Deluxe or whatever. You're never gonna, as much as Kempers and all the kind of amp modeling technologies come a long way. It's never like you might get a nice Dumble sound on a Kemper. I think Pete uses a Kemper, but it'll never be the same as a actual Dumble amp. But it just depends on what you're trying to achieve. And also it's like the amount of gear you're going to carry. Like if you only have to take a guitar, a Kemper, you're going on a plane, easy. But if you've got this, like you use a 10x8 Ampeg stack and this, that and the other, it's just I don't know,
it's going to be problematic. It's going to get old fast, and dragging that stuff in and out and trying to get to the airport with that.
Dragging stuff in and out, especially when you're tired, I know is like the worst thing. When you're really tired, you just want to go to bed. The last thing you want is like be dragging something really heavy down, especially venues where you got like 4 flights of stairs and you're like, oh, you don't have a roadie. Well, we don't have a roadie anyway. We are our own roadies, but you just like, oh. So they just leave it in the venue. We'll come and get it tomorrow. It's too tired.
Yeah, the hardware case at the end of the tour, it seems like it gets heavier and heavier every day, So,
But I say,
that's part of it, though,
You don't need to go to the gym.
That's right. That's right. Save the money on the gym.
So I mean, sticks. What are you? I think you were using some Pro Marks at the gig.
Vic Firth.
Vic Firth. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
So, Vic Firth. Have you sort of been playing Vic first for as long as you can remember?
Yeah, quite a while, quite a while. I've used ProMark in the past, and I've used some Vader models, and I've bounced around here and there, but as a whole, Vic has been my go-to, and I'm pretty much now just 5Bs. You know, they had some other series that I liked, and it seemed like I would like a signature series stick. You know, and then they would discontinue it. I understand that's like part of the risk you take when you fall in love with a boutique stick. You know, it may not be around. So I'm like, man, I'm just going 5Bs. I'm just going to get used to it. There's too many options. It gives me like anxiety. I'm
Yeah.
just going to stick with 5Bs, and I'm not trying anything else. You know, so Vic 5Bs.
Nice. I mean,
Yeah,
I think I used. I think they're called. I don't know how you pronounce them. Vincent or Winston. I used those for quite some time. My friend Dane, who's the drummer in Phil Campbell and the Bastard Sons, obviously Phil Campbell and Motorhead. I mean, I love Winston's for they were so solid and they never really broke. I mean, I've used probably every stick in the world. I did use for a period of time because Joey Jordison from Slipknot used them, and Lars Ulrich from Metallica. The A head sticks, the A head
sure.
where I think the met, and they weighed a ton. And do you know what? The way they felt when you sort of hit a snare or the synth, it just didn't have that sort of yeah that same
Yeah, it's
feel as
weird. Yeah,
it.
yeah, they didn't feel right for me either. You know.
And I think also like if you hit your cymbal dead on too hard, you're just gonna crack your cymbal. And I did crack I think one or two cymbals in my time, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I just use my, my London drumstick ones. But these are like a sort of a kind of a combination. They're like a 7AX. Like these are custom made to like the exact length, diameter. There's got like a rear loaded balance, so like rebound. But I literally went for I can't remember the exact length, but I'd find that I'd be going around the drum kit and reaching for a cymbal, and I just found that it's obviously something to do to the positioning, but I'd be missing cymbals, and I was like, and I don't know how, but I was like, right, okay, I'm going to go for let's do it in inches, like I don't know, however many inches more, maybe like 1 inch, and kind of makes a bit of a difference. It's like they're not heavy, they're quite less. They're honey hickory, so they're from the central part of the tree, and they just feel really good. Like I said, you just get to play like different weights and thicknesses, and the kind of 7AX, they're thin but they're not too fat, and they feel good. The balance is really good, and it's just. But yeah, it's all that's the thing. It's all preference, and it's all what makes you a better player, I guess. Because I think it's important, to invest in good quality gear. Like the story you was telling me, you said you played a show, and you said out front the kit sounded amazing, but then you said you stepped behind it, and you was like, oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, well, it wasn't so much terrible. It just wasn't what I expected because I heard it from the PA first,
Yeah.
and it just sounded. I mean, it sounded glorious. Like, oh man, I can't. You know, this is awesome. And then I get back behind the kit, and the heads are kind of beat up, and one of the rims was bent a little bit. And it's not like, it wasn't the meticulous, like super drum tech tuning I was expecting. It was a little bit wonky, and just I mean, just sounded like a normal kit that hadn't been turned on in a couple weeks or whatever. Um, just and it sounded amazing out front. And conversely, I mean, we've probably all tuned our setup where it just sounded amazing, and you take it to the gig, and for whatever reason, it doesn't sound good out front. I mean, there's just so much. There's only so much you can do, and that's really a small part of the overall existence of the whole sound of the evening. Nothing's bigger than the environment. What kind of room you're in. Is there any treatment or anything like that? I mean, that's the biggest factor. I mean, this, and so many of these rooms, they're just not. Doesn't sound that great in there. Kind of dual purpose rooms. It's also a restaurant, or it's a or whatever. So we'll be fighting the acoustics sometimes. So I think with that being the case, there's no need to get like super over analytical about your drums and the tuning, and is it breaking out the drum dial and all that stuff. I mean, I like to get it close, but you got to be able to get it going like fairly quickly, a couple of turns. Okay, that's pretty good. That'll work for this room. Let's go. You got to get going. Um, yeah, but I mean, I just used to really obsess about it. Like the gig is going to be ruined if my 12-inch tom doesn't sound just glorious. You know, it's preposterous.
Yeah, yeah, you can get really, like I said, really, yeah, they stressed about it. There's no need to get stressed. I mean, heads. How again? It's very personal. But how often do you change your heads? Obviously, it depends on how often you're touring and whatnot. But have you got like oh right, after so many gigs, I'm going to change my head because obviously if you've got like lots of heavy pitting in the skin, then that's going to affect the tone and.
Yeah, yeah. With the coated ambassadors, obviously, I don't get as much life as I would out of an emperor or another two-ply head. But I just wait until they start to sound bad. If they got a couple of pits and they're still sounding okay, I'll let it ride. If not, if it starts sounding bad, it's got to go. So I'll get it off there. But if there's no problems, like I've got this kick drum, this old Ludwig kick drum here, and it's a friend of mine found it in a dumpster, and he like
Wow.
refinished it and gave it to me. It's 1965 marching bass drum, and it's got the original heads on it. It still sounds great. I mean, from 1965, the original drum heads. I got like
Wow.
a batter patch and stuff, and I cut the hole in it there, and but it still sounds awesome. So as long as they'll last, I'm not going to change them. I don't really think it's a big deal to change your resonant heads. You were just telling me about the kit that had like the resonant heads on it from the factory, and it still
Yeah.
sounded awesome. I've seen that so much, like an old vintage kit that sounds great, and it's got like the factory bottom heads on it. So I don't know. I think there's
Whiskey,
some.
you can probably draw a parallel with because I like single malt Scotch whiskey and really nice bourbon and things, and it's like maybe like a good whiskey or like a nice wine. It gets better with age. Like I've had. So what we obviously had a chat about it at the gig, but so the Sterling head, the twin ply, I think it's 2x7 mm with the reverse dot. I've gone obviously when you're recording it's slightly different because you've got to have, in my opinion, fresh heads, from obviously, you got to bed them in a bit. But I've gone maybe, even gigging maybe 6 months with the same snare head. And like I said, I don't break heads, so it looks like I'm not a hard hitter. But I don't know, just like you said, if there's no problem, just keep going with it. And I found, after 6 months or whatever, it sounds really nice. And it's just kind of got this, I don't know, not a beat up sound is the wrong word, but just it's still got a really good sound. And obviously lugs come on loose, you just retune it, and then after a while you go, yeah, it's just time for a change. And you do notice a massive difference when you go from an older head to something that's completely crisp and new, and it's
Yeah, very bright and lively when you first change them. It's like, wow, that's a lot. Yeah, for sure.
But what I think about metal drum, I'm not gonna, like I said, get the. I'll show my snare in a minute. But so the kit I've got is I think I mentioned a guy in LA called Jeremy Berman Q drums, and I had a custom made copper kit. That's what I was talking about, re-rings. I think they're like 35 or 40 degree rounded bearing edges, but they're like more or less one sheet of copper, not actually that heavy, but like with a really nice patina, like a sort of aged brown patina. And because the finishes Q-Dip were amazing, some like really nice polished copper and brass, but I wanted mine to look a bit more like kind of like a mahogany, like a dark wood. And yeah, really nice, warm sound. The heads I've got the co-generators, so they're double ply top and the same on the Rezo, like I said, for a controlled sound. Just 'cause I think that kind of works rather than an open, boomy, I call it like a Zeppelin sort of stadium rock sound, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so metal drums. I mean, I've always had them. I did have a Q copper snare, which can't remember how many sheets, but it was really, really heavy. It was like a 14 by 5.5. But this is so a guy called Andrew who runs a company called Liberty Drums, and this is like a brushed uh, brass snare, and it's got this really cool rollover, like quite. I don't know if you can see it, quite thick, but it doesn't weigh very much. But it's got die cast hoops, and it sounds really, really nice, very responsive. And I thought brass, well, technically out of the metals, brass is the slightly brighter metal compared to copper. But I just think spending time on the tuning, the snare wire, every aspect, to try and get it to be a warm, a warm sound. It's really nice. I don't have the top head crank too much. Obviously, the bottom head's usually obviously tighter than the top. But I've spent many years just going through different brands, different single ply, twin ply, clear coated, and I've kind of settled on. I know what sound works for me, and I understand how it responds and the tuning range and things, and
Yeah.
and it just works. Like, so when you discover something that works for you, you don't really change. I had things like I had some little octabands. I've got this is you'll probably know a drummer called Russ Miller.
Yeah, sure.
And he's got this company called X Percussion. Have you heard of them? Or Groove
No,
or
no.
Groove or Groove X, but they do this. That's like one of their main things. It's called like an X click. So it's basically this is a maple edition. I can't remember how many ply, but it's got two plies of copper going through the middle, and basically like rim shots anyway. It just sounds really nice and it cuts through. So wood on wood. Obviously, when you're doing a rim shot, it sticks on a metal hoop. It sounds all right, but there's a song I used it quite heavily on the new record, and it just gives you this nice sound. People are like, oh, how are you? Are you playing it off the wooden hoop of your kit? And it's like, no, it's just that, and the copper gives it just this extra projection, and it's just really nice.
Wow.
And it's I want to say simple, like it kind of is a simple idea, but it's just you can do percussively you can do so much. And I think that's the thing. If you're adding tambourine shakers and stuff like that, you're not necessarily making your kit bigger, but you're just adding more color to it, and that's kind of like when I listen to the records and how you play. You've got a very percussive sound. The way you play is very so the voicing, it's got the way you play's got character, and I think every drummer's got their own unique style. It's like there's one track, and I kind of want to know how you do it. Is Level Floor Blues. That's it. It doesn't sound like, or when you're playing it live anyway, I didn't think you were using them, but it doesn't sound like traditional brushes. It's got a light sound, but it sounds like hot rods. The kind of wooden dowels. It sounds a bit like that, but I don't know what did you you know
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I recorded those drums here. I think I actually used this big bass drum here and with a really like soft beater. But yeah, it is just brushes. It's just regular brushes. I think I may have had like something on the snare too, like maybe a big fat snare drum or something similar. Um, but yeah, it was just regular brushes. I notice a lot of times, like, you know, when you make a record, like the processing, usually the compression, can bend it so much that it can sound quite different than where it started. Sometimes in a good way, and then sometimes in a like, oh dang, that's not really how I wanted this to come out. But yeah, it just brings everything up, especially the high end. You get a little bit more. The high end's a little bit more noticeable than what it would be beforehand. A little bit more brightness. That's why as like in a small with a small ceiling, you got to watch the cymbal volume
yeah
because the high end's going to come up. Um, uh, the cymbals, hitting the ceiling and coming back down, or the sound of the cymbals hitting the ceiling and coming back down into the overhead mic so quickly before it can dissipate. But yeah, that one was just the same pattern all the way through, and just regular brushes. But I know what you mean. It does sound a little bit different.
It's
You
like
know,
you've got
maybe
the wires kind of pulled in tighter, you know, or if it, or like because obviously you can buy brushes which are like nylon or bamboo, or you know, it just sounded like it was kind of, they weren't quite metal wire brushes. They sounded like they were, you know, possibly something else. But it's like, for me, one of the most accomplished songs on the record. Obviously, is, like I said, it's a consistent pattern throughout, but it's just such a beautiful song. It's so, by everyone, you know, it's so beautifully played, and it's so
oh,
like
thank you, Ryan.
you know, the you know, music for anyone, you know, it's a journey, and you know, obviously listening to different songs gives you kind of like different emotions. It's kind of one of those songs like, I don't know, like, okay, if I was to sort of picture myself, like, you know, in like in Scotland with a whiskey, open fire, and just laid back and relaxed, sipping on a nice whiskey, and it's just a really nice song, you know. I know nice is can be such a like a crap adjective, but it's just so, you know, it's so lovely. And I mean, like the thing that this will probably make you laugh, but I discovered the Cold Stairs maybe 6-7 months ago, because of some Spotify it says we recommend you listen to blah blah. So obviously I like Larkin Poe quite a lot, but yeah, Rival Sons and obviously Cold Stairs came up. I was like, okay, and then the first record I listened to was Headbent, and that kind of, I guess, yeah, had more of a punky, yeah, aggressive sound, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
kind of what started me on, you know, the journey of listening to you guys. Because you know, as a duo, the album cover, I was like, well, there's three faces on it, but there's only two of you. I was trying to figure out who the third face was on the record.
yeah, yeah. No real significance there with the three faces. It just looked kind of cool because you know his head is definitely bent. You know, it's definitely manipulated. But yeah. So yeah, that was a fun record to make. It was my old Vista Light kit, a '78 Vista Light kit, and yeah, like you said, there's more aggressive energy on that album. The song Headbent, and then Stuck in a Rut, and Neighbor Blues, and yeah, yeah, it's one of my favorites. I like it. I love that record. So we had a good time making that one.
It's kind of like, I guess, you know, like growing up, you know, I said you kind of gone from this rebellious kind of sound, you know, to, like I said, you know, on the southern where, like in a nice, I said in a nice way, you've matured a bit, but like, you know, there's so, you know, especially on like Nothing But the Blues, I love like your kick drum pattern on it, and there's definitely, you know, an element of kind of, yeah, like a kind of a Hendrix sound, you know, how Chris is playing, but I think every record's so like diverse in like the influences that I can pick out, and the production, and you know, like I said, you've got your own playing style, but just the songs are so different enough. But yeah, at the same time, you know, it's like you listen to an album and it sounds like an album. It's a journey, you know, from start to finish, and you know, and I think every record I've listened to is has that kind of, you know, that consistency, and you know, it flows nicely, and I think that's, again, that's an art, because you can have a collection of songs that you stick on a CD, which sounds great, but I think ultimately the album has to tell, you know, tell a story, take you kind of like a roller coaster, you know, you kind of going up to the top, you know, that anticipation, then it drops you down, you kind of go along nicely for a bit, and then it maybe twist you somewhere, you know, that's kind of what music's about. It's kind of taking you on a, you know, on a journey, and unexpected things, like, you know, I'll listen to, you know, especially live, you listen to that and go, oh, what's that, you know, and it's sort of, it's unpredictable, but it's, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think that the pacing of an album is something I overlooked for a very long time. You know, I know for Chris, it's really important for him to see the big picture. Like he needs a theme. You know, when he's writing and approaching maybe the completion of an album or the completion of the demos, or you know, we're putting the stuff together. He wants to see a common theme, and which is great. He's thinking about the whole presentation. How do these songs work together? What's the cover going to look like? What is this? What's the narrative around this album? What kind of studio fits this kind of vibe? So all that, I feel like all that, forethought really does help the final product.
Yeah, you got to. Like I say, it's not just the songs. It's like I said, the producer you work with, and because ultimately, I guess you have an idea of, how the songs, you know, um, how they've been written and stuff. But I don't know if Chris found this or if you found this, but you've got a bunch of songs. You go into the studio, and then some of the songs change. Obviously, like say the job of a producer, maybe like actually, maybe that bit doesn't quite work there, or maybe that's too fast, or kind of maybe swap, put that middle eight somewhere else, and then maybe have a longer verse. Did you maybe find that with some of the later records with Bryce, like just kind of, or just in general, did you find that certain songs changed from how they were first, their first inception to like the final, you know?
Not really in the studio. So we kind of get that knocked out of the way before that. We get the tempos dialed up. We'll, hey man, let's try it again, like 2 clicks faster or 2 clicks slower. We'll get all that ironed out. And we don't really work with outside producers, so we produce our own albums. And even when we did have someone producing, it wasn't like, hey, we're changing this part, we're going to make it wasn't any of that. I feel like we had a decent handle on that already, the arrangement, where things go, how the song should go. So we haven't really had an outside force, like telling us to rearrange the songs or anything. So no, we kind of just jam through it here at my place, and we work through it, and we record it, and we email it to each other, and add parts on it, and so um, but yeah. So by the time we get to the studio, it's really just a matter of getting a good take. Maybe one a good take with all of us together. We all play it together. And just jam through it. No vocals, just from memory, and that's. I think preparation really helps. It really does. Like knowing exactly what you're gonna do. Not a whole lot of surprises, just so you can go in there and create, not be thinking about, oh yeah, what's my kick drum pattern when the double chorus comes around. We should have known that 2 weeks ago. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so you're not thinking about it. So it can have vibe and performance, confidence, and not pensiveness or hesitation.
Yeah.
Hesitation is the enemy of groove, right? We know that. So, when you're not quite sure, that's when it's not quite grooving.
Yeah, like when you kind of almost say second guessing yourself. But I mean, we've worked in various studios, different producers. So like the guy we worked with on the second album is an old converted church guy called David Evans. Really nice guy. He played some piano on the second album, and it was just very experimental. So kind of, we I mean, to be honest, the songs we recorded on. No, first album, Pantomime Villains, second album, Making Tracks, yeah, same studio, but the songs became more refined on the second album, but still, he was quite experimental with kind of like percussion and just, different, what's the word? Like using different plugins and recording techniques, different mics and things like that. And I mean, the songs, especially on the first record, we've been playing for years, so they went down easy. The second album, spent a bit more time on. But the third album, which we got coming out on the 18th, called La Familia. Again, all the albums have had a theme, but the guy we're working with, a guy called Alessio, Italian chap, really nice guy. And he basically plays guitar and sings on a kind of like depth sort of basis for a band called Dragon Force. Have you heard of them?
Oh yeah, sure.
Like speed metal.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
metal effectively producer and engineer, again, like a completely different set of ears. Like he was really good for picking out these vocal harmonies, which like Dave and Pete are the main singers. I used to do a bit of singing, back in the day, but the guys decided I couldn't sing, so they said, just stop doing it. But yeah, he could
Yeah.
pick up these harmonies that, like, even I'd be like, that doesn't sound right. But when it's all sort of it's sandwiched in everything, you think it's genius. He had some really, really cool ideas. And I guess what I'm saying about song arrangements or whatever is like you've got the lyrics, you've got the verse, chorus, but you kind of, I guess, we're very open to ideas, and I kind of, this is how I think as a band. I guess it's like you think you know best, like mum and dad know best, and you kind of you trust maybe your opinion more than anyone outside, and you kind of go, yeah, that's a great song, or that's, but then to someone completely impartial to the band who's just there to kind of, I guess, do a job, gives you an idea. You go, huh? You play it and you go, oh, I think that's maybe a bit better. Like I said, the job of a producer and an engineer, they're not the same thing. But like I said, I was reading the book about Tony Visconti, is they've got more of a creative input to the band, rather than like, the engineer kind of mixing it, hitting record, that's it. The kind of job of, yeah, like a producer's become a bit more involved with the band, and they, well, effectively become part of the band. And it's, yeah, it's a different process. Everyone works in different sort of different ways, and some things work for people better than others. But it's just, yeah, I think always being open to just, because I guess also like the fans, the people who buy your records, it's almost like, I almost think they're the ones that matter the most, because they're the ones coming to your gigs, buying your merch. And one band I was in, the lead singer always said, "Give the fans what they want," and to an extent, that's true. But yeah,
Yeah, I think authenticity is key, right? Like if you're doing something that you really believe in, it's who you are, it's the kind of music you want to be making, the audience picks up on that. They see that. So they know, okay, he's not playing some character. This is who this guy is. That's what it's what we liked about Tom Petty. It's what we liked about Prince. It's like this dude's different. It's like he's really that mercurial. He's really that eccentric. So that's what draws you to them. The authenticity.
it's, yeah, you can't manufacture that. It's a.
Right. Right.
I think to an extent, everyone, I think, has a stage persona, like slightly kind of like, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. I think, on stage, obviously with adrenaline and everything, I think, you know, yeah, those certain characteristics get sort of heightened or brought out a bit,
Yeah.
especially like you're having your photos taken, you're having a music video, you've kind of got to, you put on, like, say, a game face, but you kind of put your rock and roll face on, and you kind of play up a little bit. But yeah, like I say, at the end of the day, you can generally tell when someone's not authentic, when they're not really feeling the music, or they're kind of effectively, they're a manufactured product of the industry, and you can kind of tell they're kind of very linear, kind of like
Yeah.
one dimensional. And that kind of music or whatever, for some people it works, it's great, that's completely fine. But then I said, when you go into, like, you say, you listen to King Crimson, you listen to Rush, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, or not prog, you listen to some of the blues stuff, you listen, like I said, the Beatles or the Stones or whatever, some of it's quite complex, and you got to really, it's almost like studying maths. You got to really pay attention. Like, say, Pink Floyd,
Mhm.
so much going on, and it's kind of, you got to really focus on it to appreciate the kind of the spectrum. Like it's
Yeah.
something stupid as, like, you can tell something's been panned hard left or hard right, and you think, well, why is that? Or again, I can't remember the album. It might have been a Beatles record, but it's like, I think you hear like the percussion, the drums go from left to right, and you think, that's such a simple technique, but back then obviously quite revolutionary. You think, wow, that's all reverse tape delay on Tomorrow Never Knows by the Beatles. You think, well, that's so, revolutionary of its time. And yeah, it's, music's a very intellectual thing, it's just, yeah. It can be as complex or as simple as as you want it to be. And I think that's kind of being in a band. It's a similar thing. Things can be as complex or as simple as you want them to be. And sometimes, like you said, less is more. The simpler, the better, really. But it's got to have a melody. It's got to have something that people are gonna like. Because you kind of think about that, I guess, when you're writing a song, you like it, but then it's like you almost think, are people going to like that? And that's how you pick your set, and people want to hear songs that we do, which we play maybe 6-7 years ago. You think, oh, I don't really want to play it, but it's like, well, that's what they want, play it, and people,
Yeah.
But look, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna sign off because obviously I know you said you've got your lesson, but just three very quick fire questions, and don't think about them. Just answer as quick as you can. So, favorite chocolate bar?
Favorite chocolate bar? Wow. Okay, so I don't know the name of it. I have a picture of it on my phone. I got it in Germany, and it was actually white chocolate. And I wanted to say it was something like it it ended with OTTEN. All right. So I don't remember the first of it. I just
Okay.
remember, but I do have a picture of it. It was divine. It was incredible.
You'll have to
So
send it to me because I go to Germany quite a lot, and yeah, okay. So the next question was pizza or pasta?
pizza,
Okay, hot holiday or snow holiday?
hot,
Hot. Okay.
hot. Yeah.
How hot are we
I don't do
talking?
well with the cold.
You don't deal well
I
with the
don't do
cold.
well with the cold.
So
No, no, no.
how did you find it when you came over to the UK? Because I don't know. Everyone says 9 times out of 10 you come to the UK, it's freezing, it's wet, and it's miserable. Classic English kind of.
Yeah. This was our third time, and we had good weather this time. The other two, it
It
was
was good,
typical England. It was rainy and cold. So, you know,
but
I brought a jacket, so I'm good with it.
yeah, you gotta pack accordingly. But look, Brian, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Thanks again for chatting to me after the gig. Thanks for
Yeah.
being a great drummer, and an authentic, really cool guy, and hopefully, when you're next back over in the UK, can hang out again, have a beer, and it'd be really cool. But yeah, keep writing
Sounds
amazing
good,
music,
Ryan.
keep drumming, and yeah,
Awesome, man. Thank
keep
you
doing
for
what
having
you're
me
doing.
today. It's been
Yeah, no
fun.
problem. Send my regards to Chris and Bryce, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you on the road.
We'll do it. Thank you, Ryan.
All right, Brian. Take care, man.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.